Most people spend their entire lives searching for someone who will finally make them feel complete, someone who will understand them, heal them, and fill the emptiness inside. Most people grow up believing that somewhere in the world there is a person who will finally make everything feel right. Someone who will remove their loneliness, heal their wounds, and give their life a sense of completeness. This belief feels comforting, but it creates a dangerous dependency. It places the responsibility of your inner peace into the hands of another person. And when you live like this, you are not seeking love, you are seeking rescue. The truth is far more subtle and far more powerful. A soulmate does not come into your life to fix what is broken within you. They do not arrive to fill your emptiness or silence your insecurities. Instead, they reflect them. They mirror your inner state back to you with clarity you cannot escape. If there is insecurity within you, it will surface. If there is fear of abandonment, it will reveal itself. If there is a lack of self-worth, it will quietly shape the way you experience that connection. This is why so many people feel confused in relationships. At first, everything feels perfect. There is excitement, attraction, and a sense of finally being seen. But over time, discomfort appears. Patterns repeat, emotions intensify. And instead of realizing that these reactions are coming from within, people often blame the other person. They think they chose the wrong partner, when in reality, they are simply being shown parts of themselves they have not yet understood. When you expect someone to complete you, you unknowingly place a burden on them. You expect them to always respond perfectly, to never trigger your pain, to constantly reassure your worth. But no human being can carry that weight. And when they fail to meet these expectations, disappointment follows. Not because they are wrong for you, but because your expectations were rooted in a misunderstanding of what connection truly is. A soulmate connection is not about escaping yourself. It is about encountering yourself more deeply through another person. It is a mirror that shows both your light and your shadow. The calm within you will be reflected, but so will the chaos. The love you have cultivated within yourself will be felt, but so will the areas where you are still searching for validation. When you begin to understand this, your perspective shifts. You stop asking, who will complete me? And start asking, who am I becoming? Because the quality of your relationships is directly connected to the quality of your inner world. If you are grounded, self-aware, and at peace, your connections will reflect that stability. If you are restless, uncertain, and seeking constant reassurance, your relationships will carry that same energy. Instead of looking outward for someone to fix your life, you begin to look inward. You start observing your reactions, your emotional patterns, your attachments. You take responsibility for your inner state. And as you do this, something changes quietly but powerfully. You no longer need someone to make you feel whole, because you are already cultivating that wholeness within yourself. From that place, connection becomes something entirely different. It is no longer about filling a void. It is about sharing a space where two individuals, both aware of themselves, come together not out of need, but out of alignment. Most people believe they are ready for a deep connection simply because they feel the desire for one. They want to be understood, supported, and loved in a way that feels real and lasting. But wanting a deep connection and being ready for one are not the same. Readiness begins with self-awareness, and self-awareness is something very few people truly cultivate. If you do not understand your own mind, your own emotions, and your own patterns, then every relationship you enter becomes a place of confusion. You react without knowing why. You feel hurt without understanding the source. You expect certain behaviors from others, but you have never questioned where those expectations came from. Without awareness, you move through relationships unconsciously, repeating the same cycles again and again. When someone says something that triggers you, what actually hurts you is not just their words. It is the meaning you attach to them. That meaning is shaped by your past experiences, your fears, and your beliefs about yourself. If you have never taken the time to explore these inner layers, then you will always assume that others are the cause of your emotional state. You will blame them for feelings that were already living within you. Self-awareness changes this completely. It allows you to pause and observe instead of immediately reacting. You begin to notice your thoughts as they arise. You start to recognize patterns in your behavior. You see how your fears influence your decisions, how your insecurities shape your expectations, and how your past quietly controls your present. Without this level of understanding, it is impossible to create a stable connection with another person. Because connection requires clarity, and clarity cannot exist where there is confusion within yourself. If you do not know what you truly need, how can you communicate it? If you do not understand your own boundaries, how can you protect them? If you are not aware of your emotional triggers, how can you respond with maturity instead of reacting with intensity? Many people think love will solve these problems. They believe that when the right person comes, everything will naturally fall into place. But love does not remove unconscious patterns. It reveals them. The closer you become to someone, the more your hidden layers begin to surface. And if you are not aware of them, you will either push the other person away or lose yourself trying to hold on to them. Self-awareness brings responsibility. It asks you to look at yourself honestly, without distraction. It asks you to sit with discomfort instead of avoiding it. It requires you to question your beliefs, to examine your habits, and to take ownership of your emotional world. This is not an easy process, but it is necessary. As you begin to understand yourself, something shifts in the way you relate to others. You become less reactive and more present. You listen more deeply because you are not consumed by your own internal noise. You express yourself more clearly because you know what you feel and why you feel it. And most importantly, you stop expecting others to carry the weight of emotions you have not yet learned to understand within yourself. In this state, connection becomes more grounded. It is no longer driven by unconscious needs or hidden fears. It becomes a space where two individuals meet with clarity, awareness, and a deeper sense of presence. Most people focus intensely on what they want in a partner. They create mental lists filled with qualities they desire: kindness, loyalty, confidence, understanding. They imagine how this person will behave, how they will communicate, and how they will make them feel. But very few pause to ask a more important question: what energy am I carrying within myself? There is a quiet law that shapes every connection in your life. You do not attract what you simply wish for. You attract what you are aligned with. This alignment is not based on your words or your intentions, but on your inner state, your beliefs, your emotional patterns, and the way you see yourself. If there is insecurity within you, even if you try to hide it, it will influence the way you connect with others. You may seek constant reassurance, overanalyze small changes in behavior, or feel uneasy without clear validation. And without realizing it, you will be drawn toward people and situations that reflect this insecurity back to you. Not because you want it, but because it feels familiar. Familiarity often disguises itself as attraction. You feel a strong pull towards certain people and assume it must be something meaningful. But often, this pull is simply your inner patterns recognizing themselves in another form. If you have experienced inconsistency in the past, you may feel drawn to someone unpredictable. If you have struggled with self-worth, you may find yourself attracted to people who make you question your value. This is not coincidence. It is alignment. The same applies in a positive way. When you begin to cultivate stability within yourself, when you develop a sense of self-respect and emotional balance, your attraction starts to change. You no longer feel drawn to chaos because it no longer resonates with your inner state. You start to feel at ease with people who are calm, grounded, and consistent. What once felt boring now feels peaceful. This shift does not happen because the world suddenly changes. It happens because you change. Your standards are no longer based on impulse or emotional highs, but on clarity and self-understanding. You begin to recognize what supports your growth and what disrupts your peace. And as a result, you naturally move toward connections that reflect your new state of being. Many people try to change their external reality without addressing their internal patterns. They move from one relationship to another, hoping for a different outcome, but carrying the same energy within them. And because of this, the pattern repeats. Different faces, same experience, different situations, same emotions. When you take responsibility for your inner world, this cycle begins to break. You become aware of your tendencies, your emotional habits, and the subtle ways you contribute to the dynamics you experience. You stop seeing yourself as someone who is simply affected by others and begin to understand your role in what you attract. This awareness brings a different kind of power. It is no longer about controlling who comes into your life. It is about becoming someone who naturally aligns with what is healthy, stable, and real. Your focus shifts from chasing certain types of people to refining your own state of being. As your inner world becomes more balanced, your external experiences begin to reflect that balance. Not because you forced it, but because you are no longer available for anything that contradicts who you have become. There is a subtle difference between wanting someone and needing someone. But that difference changes everything. When you feel incomplete within yourself, your desire for connection becomes urgent. It carries a quiet pressure. You look to another person not just for companionship, but for stability, validation, and a sense of identity. Without realizing it, you begin to depend on their presence to regulate your emotions. In this state, even small shifts in their behavior can feel overwhelming. A delayed response, a change in tone, a moment of distance, all of it begins to create doubt within you. You start to question where you stand, what they feel, and whether you are enough. This is not because the connection itself is unstable, but because your sense of self is not yet grounded. When your inner world lacks stability, you search for that stability in someone else. This creates a cycle of attachment that feels intense but is rooted in fear. You become more focused on holding on than on understanding the connection itself. You adjust your behavior to avoid losing them. You silence parts of yourself to maintain harmony. You give more than you receive, hoping it will secure their presence. And in doing so, you slowly move further away from your own center. Wholeness breaks this cycle. When you begin to build a sense of completeness within yourself, your relationship with connection changes. You no longer approach people from a place of lack. You do not look at them as something you need in order to feel okay. Instead, you see them as someone you can share your life with without losing yourself in the process. This does not mean you stop caring. It means your care is no longer driven by fear. You can appreciate someone without clinging to them. You can enjoy their presence without depending on it. You can allow space without interpreting it as rejection. There is a calmness that replaces the urgency. a steadiness that replaces the anxiety. From this place, your decisions become clearer. You are no longer willing to accept behavior that disrupts your peace, simply because you are afraid of being alone. You are able to walk away from what does not align with you, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. You understand that preserving your inner balance is more important than maintaining a connection that requires you to abandon yourself. This shift also changes the way you experience attraction. You are no longer drawn to intensity that feels unstable. You do not mistake emotional highs and lows for depth. Instead, you begin to value consistency, honesty, and emotional maturity. What once felt exciting may now feel draining, and what once felt ordinary may now feel deeply fulfilling. As this sense of wholeness strengthens, the need to chase begins to dissolve. You are not constantly thinking about how to keep someone interested or how to secure their commitment. You are present, aware, and grounded in yourself. And because of this, your presence itself becomes more stable and genuine. People can feel this difference. There is a certain ease in the way you interact, a quiet confidence that does not demand attention, but naturally draws it. Not because you are trying to attract, but because you are no longer trying to prove anything. You are simply being. In this state, connection becomes something that adds to your life, not something that defines it. It becomes a choice, not a necessity. And in that freedom, there is a deeper form of connection that cannot exist where there is desperation. Many people enter relationships believing that once they find the right person, everything will settle into a comfortable and unchanging state. They imagine a connection where challenges disappear, where both individuals remain the same, and where the initial feeling of closeness is enough to sustain everything over time. But this understanding is limited because it overlooks one fundamental truth. Human beings are constantly evolving. A meaningful connection cannot remain alive without growth. Not the kind of growth that is forced or superficial, but the kind that comes from a genuine willingness to understand oneself more deeply and to evolve alongside another person. When two people come together, they bring their habits, their beliefs, their past experiences, and their ways of seeing the world. If these elements remain unexamined, the relationship becomes stagnant. Over time, what once felt alive begins to feel heavy. Growth is what keeps a connection dynamic. It allows both individuals to adapt, to learn, and to refine the way they relate to each other. Without it, small misunderstandings turn into repeated conflicts. Old patterns continue to surface without resolution. And instead of moving forward, the relationship begins to circle around the same issues again and again. True connection is not about finding someone who perfectly fits you from the beginning. It is about meeting someone who is willing to grow with you, someone who does not resist change, but understands that change is necessary for deeper understanding. This requires openness. It requires the ability to listen without immediately defending yourself. It requires the courage to recognize your own limitations and the discipline to work on them. Growth within a connection is not always comfortable. It often brings awareness to parts of yourself that you would rather ignore. It may challenge your beliefs, your habits, and even your identity. There will be moments where it feels easier to withdraw, to avoid, or to blame the other person. But these moments are not obstacles to the connection. They are invitations to deepen it. When both individuals are committed to growth, something powerful begins to develop. Communication becomes more honest because there is less fear of being wrong. Conflicts become opportunities to understand rather than battles to win. Instead of trying to control each other, both people focus on refining themselves. This creates an environment where trust can grow naturally, not because everything is perfect, but because there is a shared intention to evolve. In contrast, when growth is absent, even a strong initial connection begins to weaken. One person may seek progress, while the other resists it. One may reflect, while the other avoids. This imbalance creates distance, not because the connection was never real, but because it was not nurtured through awareness and effort. A deep connection is not maintained by emotion alone. Feelings can change, fluctuate, and fade. What sustains a meaningful bond is the continuous effort to understand, to adapt, and to become better versions of yourselves together. It is the quiet commitment to not remain the same person who entered the relationship, but to grow beyond that version again and again. When you begin to value growth in this way, your perspective shifts. You no longer look for perfection in a person. You look for willingness. You look for awareness. You look for someone who understands that connection is not a fixed state, but a living process that requires attention, honesty, and evolution. And so, when you step back and look at everything you have been seeking, you begin to see it differently. The search was never really about finding the perfect person. It was about becoming the person who can experience a deep, real, and stable connection. Every disappointment, every confusion, every moment of doubt was not there to break you, but to reveal something within you that needed your attention. You were not meeting the wrong people. You were meeting reflections of where you were. And once you understand this, something inside you becomes still. You no longer rush into connections, trying to hold on to something. You no longer fear losing people in the same way, because you realize nothing that is truly aligned with you can be taken away. What leaves was never in harmony with who you are becoming. And what stays without force. There is a quiet strength in this understanding, a calm that does not depend on someone's presence, a confidence that is not loud, but deeply rooted. You begin to walk differently. You begin to choose differently. You begin to see people not through the lens of need, but through the lens of clarity. And in that clarity, you recognize something important. Love is not something you chase. It is something you allow. It enters your life when there is space for it, and space is created when you are no longer filled with fear, doubt, and the need to be completed. So instead of asking, when will I meet my soulmate? You begin to ask, am I ready to meet them as my true self? Because the moment you are no longer searching from emptiness, moment you stand fully within yourself, you become visible to what is meant for you. And that is the moment everything changes. Not because someone new appears, but because you are no longer the same person who was searching. And when two people meet from that place, not from need, not from fear, but from awareness and wholeness, that is where a true connection begins.